For those of you who don't know me, which is most of you, I'm Matt Young. I'm the CEO of UserVoice. We produce a product that I'm sure plenty of you have heard of that is for the collection and analysis and communication around product feedback, all to help you make your products better. We're joined today by a longtime friend of the company, Dan Olsen. Dan, you want to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. UserVoice, I've known UserVoice for a long time, and they've been a long-time sponsor of the Lean Product Meetup. So I'm very grateful to you for your continued support, and I'm excited for our discussion today. My career has been in product management for a long time. I wrote the book, The Lean Product Playbook, which is basically a guide on how to achieve product market fit. So this is a product I'm really excited to talk with people about.
Yep, and that is a book that definitely, at least from an N of one, can confirm that you ought to read. Very helpful. So today's subject is product market fit, and we wanted to get together, just have a conversation around it, around all the different ways that you could define it, how to measure it, how to track it, and then getting a little deeper into the subject. One of the things people don't think about as much is how to maintain it once you've got it. And we thought that it'd be a much more enjoyable format to have a conversation about it rather than one of us talking at you about it. There will be a recording of the fireside chat posted afterwards. We'll send that along to you. And we definitely encourage questions. So feel free to use that chat window with, even if you just have a comment or a reaction, that's just fine. But throw questions in there. We'll be keeping an eyeball on it and do our best to get to all of them. The format we're thinking about having a discussion for about 40 minutes and then leaving about 20 minutes for questions. If we don't need that much time, that's just fine. And if questions come up that are, close to what we're talking about right then, we'll try to pick them off as they come up. So please don't be shy. We are both, at least I could speak for Dan, really nice people that appreciate any kind of question and interactivity. So let's get started with a definition of product market fit. And I don't know that there is a Oxford English Dictionary definition that you could look up that we all agree on. Dan, how would you go about defining?
Well, the funny thing is early definitions of it are kind of like, other definitions. You know it when you see it, like those kind of definitions.
Yeah.
You just feel it, when you're in, it's like products flying off the shelves and your servers are melting down and things like that. Those aren't particularly helpful definitions. So in my book, I have a framework called the Product Market Fit Pyramid, which lays out the 5 components of what you need to have it. And as far as what it really means, I always like to look at it through the lens of customer value. And it means basically like you're creating more customer value than the other alternative products that are out there. Right? So what does that mean? It means you're solving real customer needs or problems in a way that's superior to the other alternatives that are out there. That's kind of my best definition. Well, I know later we'll get into how to measure it and things like that, but that's what it really means, is that you're creating more value. And, I'll be the first to admit, the idea of value, customer value can feel soft and fuzzy and gray. Hopefully we can make it feel a little more tangible and something you can get your arms around. But that's my definition of it. What's yours, Matt?
Yeah, I remember the very first definition I heard of product market fit was akin to what you said, one of those gut feel things. And the way someone had expressed it was when you can't keep up with the demand for your product, either through the delivery of it with technology or with people or something like that. And I'm really interested today in thinking about like whether that's actually still a problem. I mean, that definition was back in the days where you actually had to buy servers and there wasn't
right.
Scalable cloud provisional software. So I kind of think that definition's, or at least that's not a definition, that's kind of a symptom, I think. That's gone out the window, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so in light of that, I think the components that you mentioned, like you have to be solving a problem that is valuable to people in a way that they want it to be solved. You mentioned competition and doing it better than your competition. I think that it's not a winner takes all environment in most situations. So there can be multiple companies solving the same problem that have product market fit. And that's largely dependent on the size of the market and what kind of market is out there. But I completely agree with you. One thing that we had talked about, I like also talking a bit about like what product market fit isn't. And
I was about to go there too. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. A phrase that you had shared with me that I hadn't heard before that I really like is purchase market fit. And I wonder if you can share the distinction between product market fit and purchase market fit with people.
I definitely will. And one thing I want to caveat before that too is some people use product market fit as this all-inclusive term, like it means your revenue is scaling and your profitability is growing and all this jazz. And I just want to, for a second, we have a separate word, profitable. Like it does not mean profitability, just to be really clear. Obviously, you need product market fit to achieve product profitability, but it's not just a synonym for profitability. Your profitability implies additional things about like not only creating value, but capturing value, and that your revenue exceeds your costs and things like that. But I'm glad you asked about purchase market fit, because a lot of times, especially, I teach tons of workshops, training workshops at companies, and many of my clients are B2B. And every once in a while, when we're getting into the thick of talking about product market fit, I get someone from the back of the room raising their hand going, Dan, why do I care about this? They signed the contract. We got the money. They signed a 3-year contract. We got the money. Who cares if they use the product or not? What does it matter? I'm going to sales club this quarter. I hit my quota. And so that's the purchase market fit, right? So you got to be careful, because sometimes you can have purchase market fit and it's kind of independent of, did you get product market fit? For all maybe you went to grad school with the person, or you played golf with them. They just could be tossing you a bone, doing you a favor. Who knows why, right? Obviously, in most cases, hopefully the purchaser is doing due diligence, and it's often the case that if you have purchase market fit, you probably have product market fit, but it's not a guarantee. And so that's the difference is, and I think purchase market fit is more of an indicator that's not really helpful in the moment, because you sold it already. The question, and you could look at, you would look at renewal, like, hey, do they renew their contract or not? You could look at contract renewal, and some people track that as a really important metric. But I would argue that product market fit is not about purchase, it's about usage. And I will get into the crux of what does it really mean. But for me, it means usage, because if in scenario A, you sell 50 seats, of a license, and you close the deal, and, after a month or two, no one's really using any of those seats. When it comes time to renew, are they going to renew? No, the buyer's going to ask the 50 people, hey, are you all using this? You getting value? No, it's a piece of junk. They're not going to renew. In contrast, if in scenario, B, you do the training and, 50 people start using it. And at the end of 3 years, maybe 40 people are still using it. And the buyer says, hey, should we renew? The 40 people are going to say yes, because they're continuing to use it, right? So that's the difference between purchase market fit and product market fit, and trying not to confound the two. Obviously, making money is important, but you don't want to lose sight of product market fit by overly focusing on purchase market fit.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point not to be hyper focused on renewal too, because if most of us are selling annual contracts in a SaaS circumstance, for example, you can't wait a year to know if the wheels are going to fall off the wagon. You need to know that well ahead of time. You'd also mentioned to me another variation of this called feature market fit.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Another really interesting nuance. And that's a really helpful tool that I think that we could all use, while you've got a cohort of your new customers over the course of their first term, understanding what they're using, that they're still using those features and moving on. So I think we'll get into that a little bit more later as we talk about how to track things and metrics too.
And I want to say, sometimes people like read my book or hear these slides, they hear product market fit. They're like, well, I'm not responsible for the whole product. I'm just a PM responsible for these features. So that must not apply to me. And that's the wrong takeaway. The general idea applies at any level. So even if you're working on a feature, we'll be talking about and showing how you can apply these principles to see, is this feature creating value for customers, right? That's the idea. Is everything you do, you want to be creating value for customers. And obviously all the features together become your whole product, and you want to measure at the overall product level, but you can also do it at the feature level.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because whenever you're talking about company goals, and a company goal obviously is going to be to make sure that you achieve and maintain product market fit over time, it's often difficult for any individual contributor to say, well, what's my role in this? How do I affect it? If I'm not a director of product or a VP of product or in charge of marketing or revenue, how can I make sure that what I'm doing has an impact here? And hopefully we can arm you with some ways to do that through the measuring of metrics. Let's talk about the stages of product market fit. And Dan, I know that this is something that you've got laid out in a really nice way, and we've got a poll around it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the thing. One thing to talk about. I think you made this point when we were talking before this is some people act like it's a Boolean thing, like you have product market fit or you don't. And certainly there's a threshold you kind of cross upon after which it's obvious that you've got achieved a certain level, critical level of product market fit. And to your point, you can lose it, right? So I'm going to share this slide real quick, just a framework for how I like to think about. Oops, wrong slide. The 3 phases of product market fit. So I think of it in 3 phases. All right. And I'm trying to be all inclusive here. So obviously the first phase is before you launch your product. When you're working on your product or your feature, you can't have product market fit yet because it's not in the market yet, right? So that's phase 1, is before your product is live, right? It's before you have product market fit. And I would argue most products when they launch do not have product market fit. Even as I like to teach in my workshops, even the big successful companies, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, many of their new features or products when they first launch them, they haven't quite hit the bullseye yet, and they have to iterate their way there. That's the general idea, is you almost always have to iterate your way there. There are things you can do in phase 1 to increase your odds of getting close to it in phase 2, right? So phase 2 is after your product's live. And then if you're lucky, not everybody gets to phase 3, but phase 3 is like, okay, we've hit some critical level of product market fit, right? That's the idea. And just to explain this, I like to show a quick graph of either number of customers or revenue from 0 to a lot, whatever a lot is for your business, to kind of keep it agnostic. And obviously before your product is live, you don't have any customers using it or any revenue yet. After you've launched, you start to see some growth, but because you don't have high enough product market fit yet, it isn't really taking off. And then phase 3 is where you see, if you're lucky to get there, see that hockey stick, that nonlinear growth, because you're creating so much value, right? That you basically want to just grow it at that point, because that's when the thing, things are flying off the shelves and things are melting down. You have trouble keeping up with demand potentially, right? And each of these phases, you have a distinct goal. And I guess one thing I'll talk about real quick, let's see if I can get this up here, is the difference between qualitative and quantitative learning and research, right? And they're fundamentally different. And I'll do this very quickly. I like to just personify each of these with a character. And so qualitative research or learning is you actually want to sit down with each customer one-on-one to learn what's going on, right? You really care. You want to look deep into their eyes and figure it out. And who's the master doing that? When you think about television, who's really good at that? Oprah is the master of that, right? Sometimes they get Sherlock Holmes or Barbara Walters, but Oprah, right? The Oprah, if you think about it, she sits down with people, gets them to really open up, right? Then quantitative approach, and not to be crass, but you don't care about any particular user, any one user, just a data point. You want a lot of data points so you can get an average and a distribution, right? So again, from television to movies, you have the fictional character who's the master of logic and data, Spock, right? So you've got these two very different approaches, and different companies have a bias one way or the other. And so if we go back to these phases, basically, right, what's the goals, the main goals in each of these phases? The main goal in phase 1 is there's a lot of uncertainty, right? We're forming these hypotheses. We want to test our hypotheses and gain confidence before we build. That's what it's all about. Honestly, that is mainly qualitative, because you've got to really understand your users and get deep knowledge of what's important to them and what their needs are. In phase 2, now you've launched. What's your goal? You haven't quite got to the required level of product market fit yet, so you want to improve your product market fit. Now there's a mix here of qualitative and quantitative. By the way, before your product is live, you don't have any product analytics that you can use. Once you launch, now you can look at product analytics and see what are people actually doing. And you can also, though, you don't want to lose sight of the qualitative, right? So you want to do both of those. In phase 3, what's the goal? Well, we've got enough product market fit. It's like we've got this fire burning. We just want to pour gasoline on, grow it as quick as we can. Here, I would say it's mainly quantitative. And I say mainly because you hear about certain companies, especially e-commerce and gaming companies, they can do a lot with A/B testing, right? They can play with a little thing and suddenly see a 10% pop in revenue or something like that, right? So it's very powerful. And one of the things I will say is sometimes you read a blog post or article and you're like, wow, I want to try that hack. And then you try it and it doesn't work. A lot of times that's because there's a mismatch of what phase you're in versus what phase the person that shared the story was in, right? So real quick, Matt and I want to do a quick poll to see, when you think about these 3 phases and the product that you're working on, which phase are you in? Some of you should see a pop-up now, launch. Cool. You should see it pop up there. Let's see what we got. Give people a few seconds. It's always fun to see the
pouring in. So much fun.
Yes. We gave people an I'm not sure option, but let's see what we got. Okay.
If you answered I'm not sure, we need to do a better job of explain the rules probably, or maybe you're a student, something like that.
There you go. Maybe, yeah. If you don't have a product, you can just not answer, but it's all good. So we're at 63%. Going once, we got 60 votes in. Last chance to get your votes in. Going twice, 61. Okay, here we go. 62. Okay, here we go. Cool. So I'll share the results here. Share the results. Boom. Okay, so most people, not surprisingly, are in phase 2. Honestly, that's where most live products are, to be honest with you. Some people are in phase 3. That's great. They're just pouring gasoline on the fire and growing it. 27% of people are in phase 1, still trying to achieve product market fit, and then 10% we're not sure. So that's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. So from a letting people sleep well at night perspective, I believe that you can have a successful business and still be in phase 2. You may not be the fastest growing. You may not be the darling of the stock exchange or the one that all the articles get written about, but you can still have a thriving, successful business in phase 2. And that's why I think it's okay that a lot of people are there and the economy is not collapsing and we're not dominated just by a few players in the market. Yeah. What I really like about the framework that you just showed, Dan, is that those 3 phases, it scales as well. You mentioned the vertical axis being lots of customers for whatever that means for you. And in the Netflix, Spotify case, where it's a global big, B2C thing, those are millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people potentially. But you might run a company that caters to a very niche market in the enterprise, and you're looking at tens of customers or something like that, that being very good for you. The other way that I like that it scales is that if you look at it not just from a holistic product perspective, but you're looking at it from a feature perspective, if you're thinking about rolling out a new module in your product or some major new functionality, you might be starting at phase 1 again, where you're just having a lot of conversations with people and understanding the problem and understanding what the potential solutions might look like. And then as you start building out MVPs and you start pushing things out to people, talking to them more, watching some of the quantitative information to see how frequently people are using it, and then hopefully let it join the rest of your phase 3 functionality with really tight product market fit.
That's a great point. Yeah, you could have a successful company that's achieved phase 3 with their first product, and now they're trying to expand into a new market or launch a new major feature initiative. They're back at phase 1 for that, right? They can leverage what they've learned, hopefully. And back to your point, definitely, especially at the right edge of phase 2, you can have enough product market fit to have a successful company. You won't be maybe the unicorns or whatever, like you said, in growth 3. It's, the other thing that's important we didn't cover on is why there can be more than one. You mentioned a good point about it's not a winner take all, why there can be more than one player in a space. We didn't really talk about the market part of it, but you can address different market segments, right? You can be solving a similar need and say, I'm going to focus on the legal vertical, or I'm going to focus on the medical vertical. So for those reasons, like imagine like accounting software, it might be more of a horizontal play where there's one size fits all, or you might find there's people that specialize in different industries. And that's one way you can have different segments, or, like power users, hardcore users, think about, I don't know, for some reason I'm thinking about guitars. Like if you're a basic new guitar person, you're not going to buy like a multi-$1,000 Fender guitar. You're going to buy a simple guitar, right? Same thing in our tool space. If you have simple needs, you're probably going to buy a lower price point simple tool. If you have more advanced needs, you're going to probably, so that you can have different ways to divide up what might otherwise be considered a single market so that multiple people can divide and conquer that market.
Yeah, I think when you read about product market fit, after you get through a lot of the basics, a lot of people tend to say that people skip on defining the market really clearly.
Yes.
And definitely that's a thing that I see. Dan, you work with a lot of, and our company works with a lot of product companies. So we get to see a lot of different variations in how people work. And it's really easy to follow the thread of like, what is cool to work on, or what is the natural progression in your product, without keeping sight of like, who is this for? And I think that question is just critical to keep in mind at all times, whether it's a new feature that you're adding, whether it's product market fit. The nice thing is it gives you options, right? If you're in that pre-launch stage and you have built a product and you're testing it with the market and it's not really resonating with that market, but it really is resonating with this other group of people that you didn't have in mind, shifting your market is a viable option too. I can share a story about UserVoice. We did that. We actually built a product for product research within the UserVoice platform itself. It's a Zoom plugin to grab, let you annotate meetings that you're having and capture interesting moments and grab all that stuff. Product managers do a lot of Zoom calls and customer interviews, but sales, marketing, customer success, they do 5, 10, 100 times more than product managers do. So we spun out the company because it really has a different market, although the product itself was really, really good.
Awesome.
Yeah, Fathom.video, if you want to go, it's free.
Okay, cool. I've heard of that. Yeah, that's cool. That's great.
Have no stake anymore, so it's cool.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's really important to clarify that point. I'm going to share this. You see what y'all can see. I don't even know. Are you guys seeing the screen? Yeah, this one?
Can see it.
Okay.
Yep.
That's why target customer is the foundation of the pyramid. I'm not going to go through the whole framework, but that's why the target customer is the foundation of the product market fit pyramid. And the way to think about everything we're saying, if you're kind of a math geek or a science geek, is like everything we're saying is a function of the specific target customer we're talking about, right? So when we talk about product market fit or retention or something, it's all a function of this for this particular target customer. Because if you shift the target customer, your values are going to change, right? Say your product is built for small businesses. If you look at the kind of how you're doing a product market fit at that level, it's probably going to be a noisy data, right? If you suddenly, and when you do a cluster analysis, you might find, hey, within this one cluster, we have a really much higher product market fit. There's probably some salient attributes of segmentation that set those apart. So anyway, one of the quick takeaways on the data is if you're getting mixed results from your product or research, it means you haven't probably peeled the onion enough on your target market. So
yeah, define that function clearly enough. I like the math geek thing, given that that's my background. So Ronnie asked, when doing qualitative research, is there any place for focus groups or just do one-on-ones? I'm going to grab this one first, but I'm dying to know what you think about this, Dan.
Go for it.
And I'm really hoping that you disagree with me, just because I love having my non-scientific assumptions challenged. That's kind of sad. UserVoice is a product around qualitative feedback. So like we collect it all the time, just through osmosis and making sure that it's always there. So that's really kind of the opposite of focus groups and the opposite of one-on-ones. It's just, the masses out there providing you feedback. We tend to do all of our research either one-on-one with an individual user or one-on-one with an individual company if the company is the user. We're a B2B company, so having multiple people from the same company means that their needs and motivations are pretty aligned. At least in my experience, when you get a focus group, you sometimes get some groupthink going on, which can muddy the waters a little bit. I think it's a convenient way to get a bunch of people together at once, but I've definitely seen more dominating personalities in a focus group sort of take over and influence what some of the quieter personalities in a group might be. And that may be, our ability to run a quality focus group or something like that. But just in general, I prefer either one-on-one or one-on related group of people, or going the big scale qualitative route.
But Matt, if you want to interview 10 people, you can sit down and do 10 one-hour interviews, or you can just get them all in a room and knock it out in 1 hour. You can get it 10x quicker.
Yeah, you could also.
I'm joking. That's the art. That's what people say. That's why people do it. There's that allure of, gosh, I'm such a busy product person, I can't do it. But I agree. I don't do it. I mean, we did them. We did them in the early days of more on the marketing side when I was at Intuit, and I first joined Intuit, which was a great place to learn product management. They would do it, and we saw exactly, and I think it was the interest of time for things like packaging and messaging and things like that, where, so I wouldn't rule it out in all cases, but we saw exactly what you said. Not everybody speaks up, loud voices dominate, you get groupthink, so when for product management stuff, for product market fit stuff, I always do one-on-ones. Yeah. Yep. Think about Oprah. She does one-on-ones. She doesn't interview, she doesn't do focus groups.
It's I think it's also a much more comfortable environment for most people.
That's true.
One of the really interesting things about qualitative information when you're looking at product market fit versus quantitative is that you have to look at the qualitative information through the lens of its credibility. How believable is what you're getting? Were the questions that you asked the right ones? Are people being blunt with you, or are they being polite with you, or anything like that? You want to make sure you're getting the honest thing. I think you get the highest signal when you're having a conversation like this one, when Dan and I are just here talking one-on-one. There aren't 96 other people listening or something like that, but you're not afraid to be candid. And that's when you, as a product person or whatever your role might be, can really be empathetic to the problems that you're trying to solve for people, and keep your ears wide open and really understand.
Yeah, a simple metric is the more people in the room, the less likely people are to, they're more worried they're going to be that they're going to say something silly or something that's perceived negatively or be judged. So it's kind of like, that's why one-on-one is the best, with like an optional note taker. But anyway.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to measuring? Should we go on?
Yeah, let's go to measuring.
Okay.
Sean and Rahul, I love these questions. I want to make sure that we get to them at the end.
Yeah.
They're very germane, very, very germane, especially when it comes to product market fit and understanding what you'll learn there.
And Eileen's capturing them in a Google Doc. We'll definitely hit them. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. All right. So how do you measure product market fit? I think that we've alluded to the fact that you want to make sure that people are coming back and using the product over and over again. You could look at things like how easily the product is selling, or number of users and counts like that. But I agree with you, Dan. Like if people buy your product, but they don't come back and use it in the period that you're expecting them to use it, that may be a daily use thing, it may be a weekly use thing, monthly, quarterly, whatever it might be. If they're not doing that, have you really captured their attention? And how do you keep an eye on that?
Yeah. And I like to do a few thought experiments, like to kind of solidify this. People said, like, one thing is we talk about like acquisition versus conversion versus retention. So hopefully people know the difference. Acquisition is like trying to get prospects to your front door. Converting is converting those prospects into customers. And then retention is holding on to your customers, right? And I think the essence, of product market fit is that repeat usage, right? Is no matter how people came through the door. Like I always like to say, we have the world's best salesperson. Any customer gets within a mile of this person, they're signing up for your product, right? And but then the user gets in there and they use the product, and like, even though the sales job was really good, it doesn't really meet their needs. Are they going to come back and use it again? Probably not, right? In scenario B, we have the world's second worst salesperson. They don't have a conversion rate of 0, but it's like 0.1%. After talking to 1 million customers, they finally get a customer to sign up. And despite the horrible sales job, if that customer goes in there and they start using it and they go, this thing's actually pretty useful, it meets my needs, are they going to come back, right? So that kind of clarifies that acquisition and conversion are not primary determinants of it. Obviously, if you have a better product, you can do a better job on acquisition and conversion, but for me, it's that repeat usage. And so the other example I'd like to say is, think of all the movies you've seen in your life. Right? It's probably hundreds, maybe thousands of movies. And now think of just the number of movies you've seen, say 5 or more times. It's a significantly shorter list, right? Those are the movies that you go back to again and again because you get value out of them, right? They're special to you, they're entertainment, right? Same thing with restaurants. We eat more times than we watch movies, but think of all the restaurants you've been to in your life, probably thousands. And now think of the ones you've been to maybe 15 or more times. It's a much smaller number. So that's the thing, is no matter how they got in the front door, if somebody chooses to use they check out, they kick the tires on your product, and they choose to come back and use it again, it's fairly safe to infer that they must have gotten enough value the first time to come back and use it again. If instead you see someone come and use your product and then you never see them again, yeah, maybe they died, or maybe their computer crashed, or maybe they forgot about your product, but it's probably a pretty safe assumption that your product did not create enough value for them, right? And the way that we kind of track that repeat usage, there's different ways you can track repeat usage, but the most kind of systematic way to do that is retention rate, right? So I just want to quickly show retention rate and talk about a retention curve. So retention rate is a way of tracking what percentage of customers are still active over time. Now, what you do for this is you take a group of customers for a given time period and you throw them all into one analytical bucket or bin. And you basically watch with cookies or logins, and you say, okay, user ID 653, they first tried our product on this day, and then we never saw them again. User 656, they used it on this day, then we saw them 3 days later, then we saw them 5 days later. So that's how you get the raw data. And then when you create the curve, it looks something like this. Now, what we do is you re-index. The one transformation that happens is you take the days, instead of it being like May 1st or April 1st or April 7th, you re-index every user's data. You just say, hey, whatever we first saw them, that's day 0. And then you re-index the data so you can put them all into a single analytical bucket, right? So this is days since they first use your product ever. And this is percentage of user returning. So you take however many users it was, say it was 1,000 users, we're going to call 1,000 100%. And that way you can, normalize these and compare these apples to apples. So what is this curve saying? You'll notice that this curve only goes up on the axis here, only goes up to 25%. Why is that? I could have drawn this curve all the way to 100%. It would have been just a bunch of white space, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is day 0 point is 100%. What is this saying? This is saying that about 80% of people used our app once and never came back. Right. And by the way, this is real retention data for a mobile app. Mobile is brutal, right?
Yeah. I think we can all relate to this. Like, how many apps have you tried that were one and done?
If Matt told me some cool app on the phone, I check it out, I close it, I put my phone in my pocket, what are the odds I'm going to remember, right? That's why what's the first thing they do? Hey, can I turn on notifications?
Yeah.
And then the rapid drop continues. The slope starts to decelerate, starts to decrease a little bit. And then at the end, there's really one of two scenarios. And I've shown the rosier scenario here, but it either flattens out like this asymptote, like some much lower value like this, or it goes all the way to 0. And honestly, for most products, it goes to 0. So if you want to be like, gosh, okay, I believe this idea that repeat usage is the best measure of product market fit, and I want to track it, then you need to be looking at retention curves, basically, right?
Yep. Yeah. This scales as well too. I think this is probably the average for the world, but mobile app specific. But take a B2B product that has a long sales term with a contract signed. Push this whole graph up. Certainly someone's going to log in on day 1 and 2 and 3. Like, you wouldn't expect a precipitous drop off, but there's still going to be some drop off. There will still be some cohort of people that just, this doesn't work for them. And how successful you are is how high you can get that steady state percentage to be over time at the bottom of the graph.
Yeah, we're going to do a poll. So basically, if you all, this basically kind of follows what's called the power law distribution. And if you basically at some point, you may be doing this retention analysis and somebody goes, well, Dan, our product's been out for 8 months now. I think it's better now than it was 8 months ago. We're probably retaining customers at a higher rate now than we were 8 months ago, but we're throwing them all in the same analytical bin, right? So that's where cohort analysis comes in. And all cohort analysis means is you're going to divide your user base up somehow and compare the retention curves for those different segments. The most popular way to do it is by when they signed up. You might say, let's take everybody that signed up in January and call that a cohort. Everybody signed up in February. But you can do it by any segmentation criteria, acquisition channel, industry type, anything. But when you do it, you end up with more than one retention curve, right? So here you can see, again, now we have weeks since the user signed up instead of days. We've got percentage of users returning. And I've got 3 cohorts. What I want you to do is think about which one you would like to have. We're going to do a poll in a sec. You have to pick one, right? So cohort A is blue diamonds here. Cohort B is red squares, and cohort C is green triangles. I'm going to launch this, and you have to pick which of these would you rather have for your cohort. Let's see what people say. Because I think it'll subtly help us realize that even though we're not like PhDs in retention, our brain, when you see the data the right way, your brain kind of knows, what better retention, what better, kind of product market fit looks like. So let's see what we got. All right, we got 54% of people, some quick votes. Thank you. We'll give people a couple more minutes here. Last time we had 62 votes. We're almost there. Going once. Going twice. Okay, here we go. Last votes are coming in. Okay, so I'm going to share it. Here we go. All right, so overwhelmingly, people voted for C, like 90% of people. So when I give my talks, I like to jokingly say, hey, did you all like collude and get together and say, hey, when Dan puts it up, vote C, vote C. So why is it that everybody, and we have a 3% on A, 7% on B, so I like to ask people, like, why is it that they voted for C? So if anyone voted for C, you want to chat your rationale in the chat, that would be cool. And then we can talk about different theories, get different theories about it. See if anybody has theories about it. So, higher steady state. Yeah. So people are using the word steady state, the rolling out. See, okay, we got different things. Consistency, higher long term. So sometimes I get things like, well, it's the smallest drop from week 1 to week 5. And so then I like to say, okay, well, imagine I moved the blue curve and it started at 10%. Would you rather, that would have even a smaller drop, right? It would have less than a 10% drop than B. Would you do that one? And most people then they go, no, that's not quite it. Sometimes I get area under the curve from my math integral fans out there, and the bottom line is what basically Matt said. And what we're saying here, steady state, is, hey, if it flattens out at the end, I want that number to be as high as possible. That's basically the Occam's razor explanation, is if it flattens out, I want that what I call the terminal value. I want the terminal value of retention to be as high, the highest percentage as possible. That's basically the Occam's razor explanation of it.
Yep. And Philip points out a quick purchase product. Yeah. If you're trying to just get money in the door, this isn't a subscription long-term thing. Yeah. There are some products where A or B are potentially desirable. I just don't know if I would want to be working on that product very long.
Not if you want to be a company that's around for a while.
It makes me think of when the Apple App Store first came out. Someone posted an app that did nothing and they charged $9,999 for it, just because people wanted to brag that they spent a bunch of money. Don't think this applies in that case.
Yeah. I would argue that someone who charged a reasonable price and was around longer would make more the area eventually of how much money they made would be higher. But yeah, it's all good. So yeah, there are some corner cases. It wouldn't be a product webinar if somebody didn't bring up corner cases. But in most cases, you just want that to be as high as possible. So again, if you care about product market fit, you want to be looking at your retention curve and you want this to get up here, right? And a lot of times, I mentioned the Oprah versus Spock. A lot of times I share an example of an early stage validation I did with a prototype, which was frankly qualitative interviews. And at one of my talks, I got a question, someone raised their hand and they're like, Dan, hey, when you did that customer validation, how many people did you talk to? And I'm like, well, I think I talked to about 20. And they looked at me with this look of horror on their face, like, that's not statistically significant. How did you really know you had product market fit if you only talked to 20, right? So I clearly was talking to a Spock-minded person. And that, again, that's phase 1. That was phase 1 approach where it's more of an Oprah mentality. This is the Spock answer. So that wasn't satisfying for her. This is a Spock answer, right? If you really want to know if you have product market fit, if your retention curve goes to 0, sadly, you do not have product market fit. If it flattens out, then that's a measure of the level of product market fit that you have. And Spock likes it because it's behavioral versus attitudinal. It's not people telling you they would use it. We're actually watching them come back and use it again, and again. And it can be statistically significant. If you have thousands, millions of users, it can be statistically significant. So this is like the Spock, beyond a shadow of a doubt, behavioral at scale data. And so what you want to do over time is increase your product market fit over time by increasing that terminal retention rate. But if you're not tracking it today, step 1 should be tracking your retention rate to see where you're at.
Jeff, whose name I recognize, hi Jeff, asks, can we dive in and address week 2 churn reasons to retain the higher number of users from the cohort? Like you say, we do start on the blue line. How do we move that week 2 number up? I think that the math tells us that if you don't have product market fit, the numbers are still going to end up where they end up, right? That's the long-term viability and usability of the product are important. But I do think that there are some early usage tools that you can use to combat some of that fall off. Your onboarding might be poor. There might be user experience problems in getting set up. There might be some technical difficulties if you're doing integrations or that sort of thing. Those are all some mechanical things that might be in your way of getting people to adopt your product early. But all of the other things being equal, the numbers are still going to land about where they land. I don't think that you can juice the numbers up just by pushing week 2 up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. It's a long-term thing here. That's why I want people thinking in the long run, does my curve go to zero or not? And I won't get into it. There's like a leaky bucket metaphor. I mean, like, does all the water leak out of your bucket? For most new products in phase 2, they go to zero. And it's funny because if you're not tracking this, you might be looking at some vanity metrics, right? And one of those vanity metrics is active users. And I had a client who had a mobile app, and this kind of gets to the purchase market fit versus product market fit a little bit. They had a friend at Apple, and wow, surprisingly, every once a month, their app would get featured in the App Store. Go figure. And every time it did, they would see a huge spike in downloads and a huge spike in active users. And the CEO was showing me their analytics and saying, hey, check it out. This is great. I'm like, that's great that you're getting this free acquisition. I'm like, have you looked at retention? He's like, what? We flipped over retention. Guess how many days it took for all those people that tried the feature app of the day to no longer be there? It was 3 days. In 3 days, this curve went to zero. So he had plenty of acquisition and conversion, but not. So that's the idea, exactly as Matt said. It's a long game. You want to do that. Now, once you product market fit, the main component affecting retention is your product market fit. You can't put lipstick on a pig and expect to have better retention, right? So you want to get your product solid. But then Matt brought up some other good points, which is your onboarding. So your onboarding is not like necessarily your product feature set per se, but that can definitely help, right? If you realize, and this is where you flip it around, the next level of this retention is, what are some key actions? You start to slice the retention curve by people that take this key action and people that don't. The average is going to be like in the middle. And you're looking for what are the key activities that people do that leads to higher retention. You might have heard things like, well, Facebook found that if you had more than so-and-so friends, you're more likely to retain. And so then they push people to invite their friends till they got over that number. You might find something similar. There's a key feature that once people use, it really hooks them. And so you might want to, for example, promote that feature early on. There's like a drip campaign you might have. So there's onboarding, there's drip campaigns. There's also messaging and notifications, right? If there's 2 products that have the same level of product market fit and the same onboarding effectiveness, but one product never messages you at all, and the other product messages you like once a month just to remind you about key features, that other one's going to have a little bump in retention rate because they're doing that. Now, we all know there are companies that overdo it. Every day they're spamming you, and that turns you off and leads to negative retention. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about that is that when you're looking for those key moments of value, the quantitative information can definitely help you there. If you have enough information, you can mine through your app analytics to learn what those moments are. But if you're not there yet with enough users, some of that information is probably in the qualitative information that you captured in phase 1, when you're really understanding, like, for people, what problem you were trying to solve and how did you design your app around those problems to make sure that you're delivering a valuable solution for them. Is your app getting people to the point where they see the actual problem solving part of your application early? Or have you shown them 27 different features of your application through your automated onboarding that are taking them to things that are 10 steps down the line? No, get the most valuable
right
front, so that they do that early.
Yeah. And another thing you can do, this is the other thing is, again, some organizations have a bias, usually from their founders, to be more Spockish or more Oprah-ish, right? And they may argue and value one of the others more valuable. The reality is they complement each other. If we're looking at this curve and we see that, gosh, we want to try to focus on week 2 retention, how do we do it? Or say there's some conversion rate that's a lot lower than we want. The quantitative data is telling us there's an issue, but we have no idea why. So you can see some smoke. There's obviously a fire burning there, but you don't know what the cause of the fire is. That's when you would switch to qual and say, okay, let's go talk to a bunch of week 2 users and see what's going on. Why are the ones staying? Why are the ones leaving? And let's see what we can do, right? So oftentimes you'll start in quantitative, but to improve things, you need to switch to qual, and vice versa. You may start in qual and say, well, let's go see what the quantitative says. So they're both valuable.
Yeah. Dan, who owns product market fit? Whose responsibility is this in an organization?
Usually it falls on the product. I mean, I would say most on the product manager. You could say the product team more broadly, right? If you have a small startup and it's a team of 5, maybe the CEO is the one. So it's kind of like who's wearing that hat for product manager in the org is what I would say. personally, if you had to like narrow it down the most narrowly, but I think it's best if the product team as a whole acts like they're responsible for it, right? And that would include the designers and the developers, hopefully feel some accountability. But I do say at the end of the day, whose responsibility is it to like understand the customer and their problems? You know, at the end of the day, while everyone should be customer centric, I think that falls most squarely on product managers to kind of bring that information to the team.
Yeah. One place I see a bunch of companies almost set up their product team to fail at this is they don't clearly articulate to the product team exactly who their market is, exactly what the core problem, assuming that the product team wasn't on the founding team or has been there for a really long time. In early days, it's everyone wearing a bunch of hats and trying to make sure that they, figure out what the right market is, what the right product is. But as it goes on, just making sure that the whole team is focused around what the product is intended to solve. Cool. All right, let's do a time check. It's the end of the hour. This has gone by super, super quickly. And
yes,
boy, in our notes of questions here, we still have a mile to go. We want to make sure that we get to all of your questions.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't want people to lose before they leave this, there is a lot of stuff out there in the world about achieving product market fit, but it's not a given that you're going to keep it. Think about iPods and iTunes. We all use that. We all use an iPod or something like that. Who uses those today? A very small group of people. A problem still exists in the world. We all like to listen to music. We all want to have it easily accessible to us. But today, we all stream it. Tomorrow, who knows what it's going to be like? So continual attention to product market fit is really important. The good thing is all the tools that Dan showed you in terms of assessing phase, in terms of looking at retention, et cetera, are your indicators about whether you're keeping it and what's going on. So fortunately, like all these tools continue to work for you as you move on. All right, let's grab some questions.
Yeah, so Sean had one about what useful feedback can you gain from sales calls?
A lot. This, by the way, I come from an engineering background, and I think engineering has this like long-standing adversarial relationship with sales, just because the stereotypical engineering personal type is an introvert and the stereotypical sales type as an extrovert are just at odds one another. So when a salesperson jumps up and down and says, we have to build X, we have to build Y, we have to build Z so that I can meet my quota, what are you people doing? You're all wrong. Engineers at least would stiff arm that. And I think a lot of product people would too. And I think the reason for that is that sales teams are hearing legitimate reasons that your product might be deficient. But what they often don't do is look at it through the lens of, is this the right buyer? Are they in the right circumstance to buy the product? And how seriously should I take this information? So I make sure that on our sales team, we gather all the notes from all the sales calls, but we also gather who it came from. So we can check to see, like, are they in the market that we provide software for? How closely should we pay attention to this? There's gold in that information. I think that the feedback is very, very useful, but it's really important to be able to filter it.
Yeah, and what I would say is you want to make sure it's evidence-based. Like, so there's a difference between first-hand customer contact that you have. So if you're on the sales call, then you can hear it. If somebody comes and says, yeah, so-and-so really wants this, in a court of law, that's called hearsay.
Yeah,
and it's fine if people are honest, but several things happen. The salespeople, a couple of things, and we don't have time to get into this whole problem space, solution space thing, but often the clients are requesting solutions. I just need you to build me this configurator, or I need this thing. The salesperson hears it, copies it verbatim, and just brings it back and says, you got to build a configurator so we can close this $5 million deal. Now, what's lost in that is we didn't really understand what's the problem they were hoping that configurator was going to solve. So it's perfectly fine, but it's for solution ideas to come out. But hopefully you can be there to help parse it. Say, hey, big client, hey, totally hear you want us to build a configurator for you. I hear you, noted. Can you help me understand why it's going to be valuable to you? What problems it's going to solve? Just to make sure we build it the right way, right? So that's what you want to do. And be really careful once you become aware, like, Are you getting what I call proxy customer info? Is it coming through sales or some executive who's like, I worked in this industry for a long time. Let me just tell you, this is what they need. Or is it true firsthand customer data? And the bottom line is, the proxy stuff can be useful, but you always want to make sure you're grounding yourself in enough firsthand customer data.
We always use the proxy stuff as an opportunity to go talk to that person that it was a proxy for. So you'd be surprised at how, even people that you don't sell to, if they said, hey, I need this report, and the salesperson, they're not equipped to ask why and really understand in a lot of companies. But send your product person out and said, hey, I noticed you took a look at our product and you asked for this report. I'm really curious to find out why. Most people are willing to share their thoughts with you because they would really like that. It's a net positive for your company.
Yeah.
Paid panels for qualitative feedback.
So it's kind of related to Nabil's question too, which is how you get customers to do these. And, I always just like to jump and say, imagine your target market was heart surgeons. They are very busy people. They're not going to, if you get some email, I'm random startup A, we want to get your feedback. They're going to be like, dude, I'm like super busy. So you may have to compensate people for their time, and that's perfectly fine in my opinion.
I agree. Especially if you're trying to get a sampling. If you have a customer base that you're going to time and time again to ask them about what their problems are and what they need, an easy way to go get some outsiders is to just pay a pretty small amount of money. And there's a bunch of tools out there like user interviews and all that stuff to go find them. They have panels available for you. It's a good objective way. You do have to filter through a little bit of are they just doing this to get the money kind of thing? That's not true of heart surgeons. Like, they are really busy, but you can do that through some good screening questions up front on some of those panel things. Find out a little bit more about them in the beginning. Yeah.
And definitely. And it's rare. I mean, people are busy, so they usually don't do it for the money, but it makes me think too of like Geoffrey Moore's crossing the chasm curve, right? You want to find, sometimes depending on your market, you might find plenty of people willing to come do it for free, right? If these early adopters that are so into, oh my gosh, you have a new way of managing Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoin fanatic. I'd love to come check that out. Like, they just want to geek out with you on it. Sometimes in your market, you can find those people. Sometimes you can't, and you need to just pay someone. But I would argue even within the paid, there's that different level of interest or enthusiasm, and you're going to want to find the ones that are more enthusiastic about it to get better feedback and have it be true. And so,
by the way, I just want to share what are some good questions to ask during these interviews. Study how to not ask leading questions. That's one of your best tools out there. What I usually ask people to do is, hey, you've told me that you have this problem. Walk me through what you do today. You'll get a whole lot of information that you maybe didn't think to ask about when they volunteer, like what their struggles are. You might learn like, hey, I do this and this and this. And then you can ask after that, like, is that okay? And they're like, no, yeah, it's just fine. And then you've learned that maybe the problem isn't as acute as I thought it was. So as open-ended as you can, but making sure that you're actually getting information germane to what you're trying to study, I think produces the best results.
Yeah, I like to use the phrase show, don't tell. If somebody says, yeah, I hate it, Salesforce, when I have to do that one report, it's such a pain. You could stop there and just note it. What I do is I can go, hey, great, Bill, could you pull up Salesforce and show me what you're talking about? Because then you're going to get 1,000 times better data. And they'll be like, see, let me show you. This is what's annoying about it. So anytime you can switch to show instead of tell, that's, again, this more direct evidence. It's not hearsay from that one person. You're actually observing it firsthand. And avoiding leading questions. Like, say I was interviewing Matt. I said, hey, Matt, that feature was easy to use, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That's a leading question. Right? And so I know it's your baby and you're rooting for good answers, but you want to basically try to be more like an objective scientist. The other thing is you just need to be good at active listening, and you have to be comfortable with awkward pauses, right? Awkward pauses in a normal social conversation are awkward. But if you think about when you're showing someone a prototype or getting feedback on a product, it's not a typical interaction. You're coming at them with a lot of new information. They're going to need time to just parse it and digest it. So you got to be, you don't be like, so what did you like about that product? And then what I see people do is, the person's taking too long to respond. They start doing what I call fishing. Did you like this? Did you like that? Did you like this? Did you like that? Like, just resist that urge. You just have to be comfortable with awkward silences. Give the person space. and just do active listening. And avoid the leading questions and avoiding closed questions. You want to ask open-ended questions. So anyway.
One of the things we do a lot is if we show someone a prototype, we ask them a question that's very easy for them to answer, which is, what do you see?
Nice.
And people will start with like, oh, I like this, or this looks busy, or something like that. You're going to get much more honest answers than that. It empowers them, like, oh, I can answer that confidently, because you're just asking me what I see. You're not asking me something that's deeper than that.
It's not really subjective or anything. Yeah. And then the other thing, we don't have a lot of time, is to avoid false positives. Like, people are generally nice. And so if you show them this, like, oh, this is great, you know? And so the main technique there is to employ is what we call skin in the game, which is like, you know, say Matt tells me he likes the prototype, you know, did he really like it or not? So at the end of the interview, I'll be like, hey, Matt, it sounds like you really like this prototype. We're going to have an updated version in 3 weeks. Can we schedule time on your calendar right now for that session to go over the new prototype? If he truly was excited about it, what's he going to do? He's going to be like, yeah, let's schedule it right now. Mm-hmm. If he was just giving you baloney, he's going to be like, well, I don't know what's going on. Let talk to my assistant. Just email me. We'll figure it out. Right. So it just kind of calls BS on that. Or, hey, Matt, sounds like you really like that. You know, we want to talk to other CEOs like you. Can you recommend three CEOs that you would connect us with, saying, hey, you should definitely check out Dan's product? Again, if they're happy to do it, it was a real positive. If all of a sudden they go, well, I don't know, then you know. And the last one is money. Hey, it sounds like you're really into this. We're taking a $5,000 deposit to be in our private beta that comes out in a month. Would you be willing to do that? So those are 3 skin in the game techniques to get false positives out.
All right, we're at time, but there's one last quick question I think would be a good note to end on. Brett asks, if very little attention or effort has been put towards product market fit so far, where would you start? For me, it's making sure that everyone on the team has a clear articulation of the market that you're trying to go after and the problem that you're trying to solve for them.
Yeah, and I would say, and honestly, Brett, many companies are in that boat. Yep. Many companies are in that boat. It's kind of like many companies are throwing solutions-based ideas against the wall, and some get lucky, and you know they're not doing the scientific. Who's the customer? What's the problem? So some customers get lucky, and then they live long enough to say, okay, let's see what we can do. So what you can do is just analyze who is using our product today. Why do they like it? You know, who tried our product and stopped using it? We call those abandoners. Why did they do that? And try to start to piece together an equation of, well, who is this really for and what problem is it going to really solve for them? And so usually if you've been in market for a bit, you've got enough data on the positives and the negatives to try to start to put that puzzle piece together of, well, the people that are using us or like us, who are they and why? The people that tried it and didn't stick around, who are they and why not? You can usually, you know, get some foundation of hypotheses from which you can iterate and grow.
That's great. All right, Dan, for the people that came to us through their relationship with UserVoice, how can they get connected with you and how should they follow along with what you're up to?
Oh, I mean, yeah, my website is just my name, dan-olsen.com. I'll put it in the chat. Y'all can check that out. And then there's Lean Product Meetup. I have that right here. So if you're not familiar with that, we've been doing it for over 8 years. UserVoice has been a long time sponsor. So again, I'm really grateful to them for that. And each month we bring in top speakers. Last night we had our meetup with Martina Lauchenko, a partner at Silicon Valley Product Group, who wrote her new book, Love, comes out. UserVoice is one of our ebook sponsors. What we do with COVID, before COVID we get together in person. Now we do it online, so we give out ebooks. So Product Board does a great job. Product Board and UserVoice are 2 sponsors that do that. So really grateful to UserVoice for that. So you can hear from top thought leaders like right when their book comes out. So I recommend joining that group for free. And then my URL I'll put up here is just my name, and it has links to all the other stuff if you want to check it out.
Awesome. You guys are welcome to get in touch with UserVoice anytime through uservoice.com. My email address is matt@uservoice.com. If you guys have any follow-up questions, any further conversations that you would love to have about this subject, it's what we study. So free interview for me, I think. I put it that way.
Yeah, and I would just say that because Matt really didn't talk about UserVoice, it's a great tool to do some of these analyses that we're talking about, especially the segmentation analysis. So you can see how the feedback varies across different segments and markets. So cool. Definitely, if you're interested, do a free demo.
Nice. Appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everyone who joined.